there's a deck in Legacy right now, and it is called Oops All Spells. And the way that this deck works is that it has completely subverted the systems of Magic in that it doesn't really play any lands. So then when you play something like Undercity Informer or Balustrade Spy, and then you activate their ability, they will mill your entire deck into your graveyard, and then you can reanimate Thassa's Oracle and win the game. So this deck is particularly problematic, but one thing that players might not be noticing that is part of enabling this strategy is the card Pact of Negation. We're going to talk about Pact of Negation's history. We're going to talk about why it's problematic and maybe a way that you could print a counterspell like this that might not cause so many problems.
Distraction makers.
Okay, so let's go back in time for a minute and talk about where Pact of Negation came from. The card was printed in Future Sight, but we have to go back even a little further than that to the card that inspired the cycle of packs that came out in Future Sight. And that card is...
Rocket-powered Turbo Slug.
Uh-huh.
It's a card from Unhinged, came out in 2004, and it's 3 in a red. It's a creature slug, creature type, 3/1 with Super Haste. Super Haste says, this may attack the turn before you play it. You may put this card into play from your hand, tapped and attacking, during your declare attacker step. If you do, you lose the game at the end of your next turn unless you pay this card's mana cost during that turn.
Mark Rosewater has talked about how this card design inspired him to create the Pacts in Future Sight, which are all cards that you can play for 0 mana, and then you have to pay for them on your next upkeep, and if you don't pay for them on your upkeep, you lose the game. But there's one fatal flaw in that design idea.
You play it, and then you win the game.
Right. And then you never have to pay for it. So let's talk about the cycle of pacts real quick. So the pacts are...
Intervention Pact, cost 0, like all the pacts. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage, you gain life equal to the damage prevented this way. And then its version of the losing the game is at the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 1 and 2 white. If you don't, you lose the game. Next, we have Pact of the Titan. Pact of the Titan says create a 4/4 red giant creature token. At the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 4 and a red. Otherwise, you lose the game. We have Slaughter Pact. Destroy target non-black creature. At the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 2 and a black. If you don't, you lose the game. And we have Summoner's Pact. Search your library for a green creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. At the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 2 and 2 green. If you don't, you lose the game. And finally, we have Pact of Negation. Counter target spell. At the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 3 and 2 blue. If you don't, you lose the game.
Free counterspells have like a pretty long history in Magic. You know, we can go all the way back to Force of Will. Apparently, Force of Will was kind of designed... From what I've heard anyway, it was kind of designed as a joke almost, in that somebody was like commenting on the fact that that I know you don't have any untapped mana, therefore I know you can't counterspell.
I think it was a designed space that they thought, oh, well, we haven't explored this, right? Is that what if you could play a card even though, you don't have...
you don't have the mana to do it.
You don't have the mana to do it.
Yeah, and so a lot of pitch spells showed up around then. The pacts themselves are the first cards ever, besides Rocket Power Turbo Slug, which was, you know, kind of a joke card, to have you pay something or lose the game. This sort of design space has some weird problems potentially with people forgetting the trigger that you need to pay for this on your next turn, right? There's a bit of upkeep problem there. But specifically when we look at Pact of Negation, with it being a free counterspell that counters anything and has almost basically no restrictions other than you need to pay for it on your next turn. In a vacuum, this theoretically isn't that big of a deal, right? It's that, okay, I countered a spell on my opponent's turn, or I was able to tap out on my turn, I countered a spell on my opponent's turn, comes back to my turn, I pay the 5, and I don't lose the game, but I've had to tap out and pay for this expensive counterspell. But really when it gets problematic is when it's included in decks that are attempting to win the game very quickly. Usually combo decks that want to stop their opponent from being able to stop them. The way that Oops All Spells works is that it doesn't play any lands. The lands that it does play are both a land and a spell, but they're a spell first and a land second, which means like on their front face, they're a spell. So when you activate a creature like Balustrade Spy or Undercity Informer, you mill your whole deck into your graveyard, you flashback Dread Return and reanimate Thassa's Oracle. You don't have any cards in your library, so you win the game. If you didn't have Pact of Negation, you would have to rely on something like Force of Will, right? Where you have to exile a blue card from your hand in order to play it. But this deck doesn't play a ton of blue spells, right? Pact of Negation in particular is very strong in this type of a strategy. We see the same thing happen cEDH too, right? If you're attempting to win the game, you're going to win the game, then you don't care about paying for this spell. So let's talk about cEDH for a minute and how problematic Pact of Negation is. The play patterns are quite similar, but cEDH has one other particular instance that's problematic, and it's with draws. If draws give you a point, like they currently do in most of the North American cEDH tournaments, you can force other players to draw by using Pact of Negation as sort of a king-making spell. And you can basically say, I'm going to use my Pact of Negation to stop this person from winning and let you win, or I'm going to use my Pact of Negation to stop you from winning and let them win, and then you can force a draw this way, and you still never have to pay for Pact of Negation. Okay, let's say Wizards of the Coast wants to continue to explore this design space of free counterspells. We sort of identified free counterspells that can be used proactively as something that is kind of a danger zone. But what do we think is a better alternative here? Specifically for Magic, and then we can talk about sort of this interaction in games outside of Magic too. So one thing that I thought about for a free counterspell that would be less problematic would be a counterspell that's free as long as it's the first spell that you cast this turn.
Technically, you could still be going for some sort of a win, but it wouldn't be via casting any sort of spells.
Right. It'd be considerably more difficult, right? Where you'd have to have sort of permanence in play that can win the game through some kind of combo that then somebody goes to disrupt, but you still had to like play those pieces, right? So it would have had to been on a previous turn in order to get this counterspell for free.
I mean, that being said, that would be an incredibly strong counterspell though on your opponent's turn. So I do kind of wonder if there's maybe some other sort of like a hard cap to it to then still limit that general like exchange, right?
Yeah, well, the other thing too, and we see this more often now, is that Wizards tends to limit the targets that counterspells can interact with to usually like non-creatures.
Right.
Just to sort of, narrow the scope a bit more. So let's talk more broadly about the problematic play pattern here. And really it's that the risk that you run by having such a strong proactive counterspell is allowing someone who is theoretically winning the game without doing much in terms of like interacting with their opponent. You're giving them a tool to stop the opponent interacting with them as well. So one thing that's kind of interesting is that you could build this into the systems of your game to ensure that there's some amount of interaction that happens in every game, regardless of what is being played. One interesting solution that we've seen is the game Sorcery, Contested Realm. They have this mechanic called Death's Door, which means that if you basically lose the game once, you go into like you have like a Death's Door mode, which means like if you lose the game again, you almost have to like lose the game twice in order to actually lose the game.
Yeah, you were telling me about the Death's Door mechanic. I think it's interesting because it sort of is a failsafe to prevent these sort of one-turn comboing off. I think that would be an especially good sort of a mechanic to add into a game like something like Yu-Gi-Oh, where maybe some sort of a general one-turn kill is a little bit more problematic or more possible.
Yeah, this does feel like a particularly like blunt force way to prevent this kind of thing, but it does work, right? I mean, you're basically saying, yeah, you can win the game in one turn once, but you'd have to do it twice in order to actually win the game. So your opponent will get some kind of chance to respond to what you're doing.
Currently, that could definitely work for this type of a game, but in Magic's case, the only reason that this is we're getting this Oops All Spells deck is just because over time we've had enough of these cards printed that can subvert the need for lands, so that you can have these cards that dig through the deck that doesn't have lands, and so on and so forth. And the same thing can happen to any other game, right? You can't account for the fact that, maybe players at a certain point in time are going to want to play this format that plays all of these old cards, and maybe there's these old cards that we didn't expect to work together this way.
Over time, as you creep into new design territory, combos will emerge. Weird systems interactions will emerge inevitably. So it is interesting to try to build like a fail-safe into your system. Another way that you could approach this is to build in interaction into the system itself. We see this, I think the One Piece game kind of works this way, where you have to beat the other, like the opponent's leader card in order to win.
I think that's how it works.
I'm pretty sure it's
been a while since it was explained to me.
But yeah, so a system kind of like that, right? Even Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like when you're attacking, you have to attack your opponent's creatures first before you can hit their life total.
Right.
So there's sort of these fail-safes you can build into the game that basically say you have to somehow interact with what your opponent is doing before you're able to get to the resource life points, usually, that actually gets the game won.
I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh used to work like that.
Well, I'm sure, again, the systems get subverted, right?
Then again, Raigeki was printed in the base set. you know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm, you know what I mean?
I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Dark hole.
That kills everything, right?
That was crazy.
Rigeki blows everything up?
Well, blows
all
up
creatures.
all your opponent's creatures.
It's one-sided, too?
And they're free. You can cast as many of those as you want.
What are you doing? Duel Masters kind of works this way.
Yes. And honestly, I think this is actually why we've seen so many games adopt Duel Masters' sort of shield break system. It's a shame because I think a lot of people are giving Bandai Namco a lot of that credit nowadays, but it was Wizards, again, designing Duel Masters.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise. And yeah, we're seeing now adaptations of that with stuff like the Digimon game.
How does that work in Duel Masters with the shield?
So in Duel Masters, you have, I think, 5 shields, and you have to break your opponent's shields, essentially. So instead of you dealing life totals, it's every time that you attack and get through, you target an opponent's shield, and that's essentially acting almost like a prize card in Pokemon, but you pick up the card, the person that got hit, and you get that card now. And sometimes there will be a shield trigger on a card, and you get to activate it for free.
And you can only break one shield at a time.
Right. There's mechanics that allow you to break more than that, but yeah.
There we are again.
Well, and I look...
Subverting systems. It'll happen inevitably, right?
I don't know how far they are now in Power Creep and Duel Masters. It's been, I think I played the first 3 or 4 sets.
It's only printed in Japan now, right?
Now, yeah. But I mean, Kaijudo got reprinted here. But from what I have seen, I've at least seen triple breakers. So you can break 3 out of the 5 shields in one hit. But I've not seen anything higher than that.
All right.
I think it's much better to make some sort of an exciting, impactful card. And like, who could see that this is the chain of events of how it would unfold, years later, right? Like, I'm sure it was a problem when it came out, but I don't know if it was this much of a problem.
It was not this much of a problem. It was good, but I think it was kind of played in Combo Decks and Standard. I don't know. I don't remember if Splinter Twin was around when this was in Standard. I can't remember exactly, but I know this was the pack that saw the most play.
Sure.
But I do think that, part of this too, especially in the design, the design space when this card came out, Standard was the premier format. So they were much more focused on making sure Standard was balanced and everything was fun to play against there.
Yeah.
And, the rest of the formats kind of got some of the most powerful things sort of creeped into the other formats. Time Spiral Block specifically was pushed quite a bit for sort of bringing in players from the past and things. Outside of its intended play experience in Standard, I do think that it might be a bit problematic in cEDH, in Legacy, where these decks, their power level is so high that they can utilize the card without having to pay the cost. It's just a free counterspell.
So do you think they should ban Pact of Negation?
If they wanted to keep Oops All Spells around, I think, that might be a good target, actually.
You mean if they don't want to keep it around?
No, if they do. Because they're not banning any piece of the engine for the deck.
Oh, I see what
you're
saying.
They're just banning its best piece of interaction.
Do you think that would just completely, mess the deck up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It would just be a lot more of an all-in strategy, like it should be.
Sure.
I mean, it is the sort of Zergling Rush of Legacy, right? So,
right.
Now give Zergling Rush a shield or something so that their Zerglings can't die, and then that's what you have now. So
it's Zerglings in a bunker?
Yeah, Zerglings in a bunker.
Okay.
Yep.
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about Pact of Negation and why it might be a problem, please feel free to give us a little like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below.
Also, if you want to continue the conversation, you can join our Discord. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.